Welcome to the Heartbreak to Happiness Show with Sara Davison. If you're struggling with a breakup and you feel shocked, angry, betrayed, devastated, or sad and alone, then this podcast is for you. Best-selling author and award-winning host Sara Davison shares how you too can get on with your life to heal, grow, and move from heartbreak to happiness. Here's your host, Sara Davison.
Welcome back to the show. And today, my guest is Andrea McLean. Andrea is a multiple Sunday Times best-selling author and broadcaster and a personal growth entrepreneur. She is a #1 Sunday Times best-selling author of This Girl is on Fire, Confessions of a Good Girl, Confessions of a Menopausal Woman, and You Just Need to Believe It. In her 24-year career as a broadcaster, Andrea interviewed some of the biggest names in the business, including Oprah Winfrey, Beyonce, Drew Barrymore, and Michael Bublé. In 2020, after serving as the longest reigning host of Loose Women, a super popular UK TV show, Andrea pivoted, leaving behind her role as a national television anchor to pursue her passion for service and to devote her time to helping midlife women feel great about themselves through her business, This Girl is on Fire. So I am super excited to welcome Andrea McLean to the show. Welcome, Andrea. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. It's going to be a good one.
I know. Oh my goodness, I'm super excited. I mean, obviously you are one of the best known faces for most of us Brits here because of your amazing career in TV. Tell us a little bit, how did you get into it? Did you always know you wanted to go into TV?
No, I fell into it. And I feel a bit bad saying that because there are people that, fight tooth and nail to get in. But I was fighting tooth and nail to become a writer and become a journalist. And that had been my dream since I was about 9. And I'd moved to London with no contacts, slept on floors. I stayed in a particularly nasty bedsit with a toilet down the hall to put myself through college. And I went to a periodical journalism training course, worked for free. And then after working for a couple of years in print, which was brilliant, and I loved it, I unfortunately got promoted to being production editor of where I worked. And anyone who understands what being a production editor means understands it is the worst job. Well, some people love it. I didn't love it. It's not creative. I wasn't getting to write. I was in charge of making sure everybody was getting their copy in on time. And so I started sort of applying for jobs elsewhere, and I misread a job advert, and it ended up being for a weather presenter. And I thought this was so funny. I thought I'll go along and write a piece about what's it like to audition to be a weather presenter. And I ended up getting the job. So that was how I ended up in TV.
Goodness. I mean, that's crazy. That is absolutely crazy because obviously that's where I first saw you doing the weather. And I think you still are well known as one of the friendliest, most approachable people on TV. And then you went on to host Loose Women. So tell people, because obviously people listen to this all over the world, a little bit about Loose Women and what you did there.
So Loose Women is the British equivalent of The View. And I was the longest serving anchor of that program. I left after 13 years. And it was an incredible show to host. We covered amazing topics. We had guests that you could literally only dream of. I interviewed Oprah Winfrey. I interviewed Michael Bublé many times. He's one of my favorites. Many A-list stars who came over to the UK to promote their work, and also some incredible British stars as well. We had musicians perform. I had my photograph taken by Bryan Adams as part of a body confidence episode that we did on the show. So I had an incredible time working there, and I loved working in television. And then it just came time for me to pivot and try and do something else. But oh my gosh, it was a ride. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, you shared a lot of personal information. Some of those topics were quite hard hitting, and obviously you've had your fair share of heartbreak, as are most people listening and watching this right now. So, how did you find sharing some of those stories with everybody? Because getting divorced is bad enough. You know, it's known as the second most traumatic life experience we go through after death of a loved one. But you did that in the public eye twice. So, tell us a bit about that.
Well, when I first joined Loose Women, I found the openness of it really very challenging, because I had already worked for 11 years or so in breakfast television. So I worked on the equivalent of Good Morning America, and I started as the weather girl, but I sort of let them know, look, I've got broadcast training, I've got journalism training. So I then became known as a very empathetic and warm interviewer. So I was sent to interview people who found it difficult to open up, and I loved it. That was my skill set, and I loved it. So then when I moved on to Loose Women, I was used to anchoring a show, which was what I was being asked to do, but I was in no way used to bearing my soul. I was used to asking other people to do that, not me. So I found it really challenging. And then I realized that there was such power in openness, because through sharing your story, you make others feel less alone. And that, for me, instantly stripped away the sort of fear of judgment. Now, clearly not all fear of judgment, because I wouldn't be human if I didn't have fear of judgment. We all have it. But once I saw that actually by sharing my experiences, whether it was of infertility, struggling to have children, I had to have fertility treatment to have my son, of having a hysterectomy at 45, I had a full hysterectomy and went into full surgical menopause. And then eventually, obviously, opening up about, as you say, getting divorced, not once, which is bad enough, but twice. It's hard, because it's easier to talk about something that has been challenging in your life when you're referring to it in the past. Yes. Once you've done all the work and you've come out the other side, you know, I can sit here quite now easily and talk about it, because it was years ago, many years ago. In terms of my first marriage, it's almost 2 decades ago. But when you're actually going through it at that time, it's raw. And what many people at home didn't realize is when I spoke about my divorce on the television, it had been building up to that moment for quite some time. I hadn't breathed a word to anybody. He had actually left the family home probably a month before, and I hadn't breathed a word. I also wasn't even living at home at that point. I had lots of ins and outs that I can't go into for personal and legal reasons, but I'd taken the kids and we'd moved to live with my parents, who were in Cheshire. And I was actually commuting from Cheshire, not even mentioning that I had this huge round trip. I didn't tell anybody what I was going through, not the team, no one. I think the only person who knew that I wasn't at home was the people who booked the trains. And I just said, oh, I'm with my parents, never mentioned it. When I eventually said the words out loud, I need to announce my marriage has ended, it changes everything, because anyone who is going through a divorce, you can kind of keep a lid on it before anybody knows. But the minute it's out in the open, everything changes. It's like you're walking around with an open wound that people feel bizarrely entitled to poke their finger in and give, whether it's an opinion, ill-informed or otherwise, their take on it. They project their own sort of experiences onto you. It was really challenging. And I must admit, I didn't talk about my divorce on television in order to help people. I just talked about it because I had to. Now I talk about it because I know it will help people. But at the time, I was public property, and I needed to say it out loud.
I mean, that's got to be so tough. And I remember when I heard the news and watched you talk about it, you know, I could feel your pain through the screen, you know, and having been through that myself, you know, obviously I get that pain, but that is so difficult to be that vulnerable with the public, you know, because suddenly everyone, like you said, has an opinion, and some of it's true, some of it isn't. So, and on top of, you know, most people listening are not in the public eye, they're going through a breakup, it's hard enough. So how did you cope in the toughest of times? What was it that you did, or were your coping mechanisms that you would say helped you through those early days?
Weirdly, working, to an extent, working helped, because it gave me something else to think about. Because otherwise, when you're going through something that's so raw and painful, you just ruminate. It's all you can think of. It takes up every waking thought, and even every thought when you're supposed to be sleeping. So
Yes.
going to work actually was a good distraction. And once I'd said it, during that hour that I was live on television, I had nothing else to think about. It's like, you know, when you work in live television, I liken it to being a Formula One racing driver. You cannot be thinking about anything else other than the job in hand. You get distracted, you'll crash. Now, clearly a Formula One racing driver, if they get distracted and crash, you know, they could really hurt themselves. I could lose my job and embarrass myself. But it's kind of the same. You're doing something that is immensely pressured, and yet your job is to make it look so easy and deliver for the people you're driving for. So whether it's McLaren or whether it's ITV, it's the same. So for me, that was a respite. It was a relief, because I didn't have any. So in the build up to it, you know, prepping in the morning, going through the papers, going to the morning meeting, sitting in the makeup chair, having the researchers and producers, from the minute you walk in the door, it's go, go, go. The script's changing, there's things changing, there's guests changing. When you're on air, there's people talking in your ear. You've obviously got a studio audience to think about. You have your guests. There is so much going on in your head. And whereas that would normally be very stressful, it was great. Because actually I could breathe out for a minute and just, I knew I was good at it. I was actually in my comfort zone doing something so challenging. It was the other 23 hours of the day that were hard.
It's very true. When you're distracted, that can really help. When you're there left to think about it, it's when the lights go out at night, I think. And that's what a lot of my clients say. I know that's what I felt. Sleeping at night, super hard. Getting used to, you know, maybe an empty bed again, and just living that routine on your own. And being a single mom as well, you know, that's a challenge too. How did you adapt to being a single parent?
Well, sadly, I'd been a single parent before, because this was the instance I'm talking about now was actually my second divorce. And, you know, to be divorced once in this climate, as painful as it is almost acceptable. But to be divorced twice, that smacks of recklessness. What on earth are you doing? You know, and to this day, no one knows, no one other than my very close inner circle knows the full story of what happened in both of those occasions. And in both of those occasions, I took the hit. I took the hit publicly. I took the hit at the school gates. I never corrected people when they made up their own stories. I didn't correct the press when they made up their own stories. 99.9% of what was reported wasn't true, but I took it. Because I have children. If I didn't have children, I would have very happily put everybody right. But I have a child by both of my marriages. And my job, I see, is to protect my kids as much as I can. A slightly strange existence because they have a parent who is famous. So that's already putting pressures on them. The last thing they need is a famous parent slogging it out in the press. Going, actually, that's not right. Actually, that's not true. I never did that. And what about this? And what about this? That's not fair. So for me, I thought, you know what, just take the body blows and let it go. And there are people out there who will believe what they want to believe. There are people who love me and actually understand the truth. And I kind of refer it back to, there's a brilliant quote by Christian Bale, which I'm sure many of you listeners and viewers will be aware of, but when he talks about trolls, and be aware, trolls can be people that you know in real life. They don't have to be faceless eggs on Twitter or just someone who takes against you on Instagram. Trolls can be in your actual real life. And he said, you know, you have a problem with me, give me a call. And if you don't have my number, you don't know me well enough to have a problem with me. And I try to stick to that. And also a mixture of Kelly Clarkson, because Kelly Clarkson is my superhero. I love Kelly Clarkson. And I remember once she was being interviewed, and the interviewer rather callously brought up the fact that another interviewer had said, or a columnist rather, had said a particularly mean thing about her. And she said, read out this statement and said, so what do you think about that? I mean, how nasty is that? Yeah. And Kelly Clarkson said, oh, well, that's a shame, because if they knew me, actually, they'd like me because I'm awesome. Oh, I love that. I love that, because I feel the same way. I think, one, if you have a problem with me, call me. Yeah. And if you don't know my number, you don't know me well enough to have a problem with me. And also, if you did know me, you'd like me, because actually I'm all right.
I love that. And that takes confidence, doesn't it, to say that, I guess. And a lot of people listening to this will be on that journey of rebuilding their confidence. And you and I both know what it's like to come out of a relationship and be trying to figure out who you are again, and in what makes you tick, and are you a nice person? Because maybe, I know in my marriage I was told I wasn't. So coming out of that and rebuilding that confidence is tough. How did you find your feet and rebuild your confidence after, well, both of them? And does it get easier a second time around, or is it just as bad?
It's just as bad. It's just as bad. And both my incidences were very, very different. They were different. In terms of rebuilding my self-belief, after my first marriage ended, that took a very, very long time, because I hated myself. All the flack I got, it was nothing compared to what I was saying to myself, because my first marriage was already ending, but I was unfaithful at the end. And for someone I am a good person, a kind person, a nice person, all these things, but I did that thing. Now, I did it for my own reasons. It wasn't frivolous. It wasn't whatever. It was seeking comfort. But I can put whatever sticker I want over that to help myself feel better. And in my heart, I know it's true, but I still did that thing. So for me, I felt I deserved every bad thing that was coming my way. I deserved it all. And for me, that was the hardest part to rebuild, because who am I? Who am I? How I always thought I was this good, nice person. I never thought I would be the one that would end up in this situation. So for me, how did I overcome that and build my self-belief? I did whatever I could to be a great ex-wife, to be a great single parent, to do what I could to rebuild and repair. And I did that at a loss to myself. I did it at a loss to myself financially. I did it at a loss to myself emotionally. But I felt that if I could look at myself in the mirror at some point, and that took years, because I got to a point where I was agoraphobic. I could only leave the house to go to work, take my son to nursery, maybe pop to Sainsbury's, and maybe take him to the park. Other than that, I could barely eat. I'd be eating something that was nice, and a little voice in my head would say, you don't deserve to eat nice food. And I'd have to spit it out. I'd be watching a film, and a little voice would say, you don't deserve to be watching something that you enjoy. It was terrible. So for me, it was overcoming that horrible, horrible voice that I felt was speaking my truth. It was learning how to overcome that, which is, I may have done this thing, but I am a good person. I may have made mistakes, but I'm doing my best now to repair. The past is done. What can I do in the present to make my future better for myself and my son? So that was that instance, and it was horrific. It was terrible. In the second instance, which was when I was working on Loose Women, at the time when my first divorce, I was working on breakfast television, so I had the same amount of, press interest. The second time, it was a very different situation, but again, that voice reared its head, and it was a case of, well, what do you expect? No wonder you got this. This is all you deserve. But this time I was able to reframe it much more quickly, because I'd been through it the first time. I was able to understand that's not true. That's not true. These things that you're telling yourself in your head, that nasty, nasty voice that is sitting on your shoulder and just whispering into your ear, it's not true. So for me, and people will react in their own individual ways, but for me, I'm actually quite a shy person. I'm quite an introverted person. I'm confident. I believe in myself. I have huge amounts of self-belief in what I'm capable of. But in terms of emotionally, I'm quite a shy person. So I retreated inwards. It happened again. I was dropped by the mums at the school gates. Friends I thought I had, no one's picking up the phone. And I retreated inwards, and my group became very small again. And there was a kind of resignation to it because I'd been through it before. But what I focused on was, am I safe? Are my children safe? Can I provide for my family? That's all I care about. Yeah. Anything else, that is all I need to focus on right now, is looking after the safety of me, my children, and working to put a roof over their head. Anything else, that doesn't matter. And Amy put it really well, actually. Amy's my daughter, and we ended up talking about this period in time quite recently, and she said, wow, Mom, I didn't even know you were doing that. When I was little, you must have been like Mrs. Incredible, and you must have just like stretched over the top of us. And she said, I can almost see me and my brother playing underneath while you're stretched over the top of us like an invisible force field. So all we knew was just our happy house. I didn't know any of this went on, and I sobbed because that's all I wanted to do. And it's like bullets bouncing off. But I will say, I'm not Mrs. Incredible. I'm just a normal person. And obviously, bullets might not pierce, but they still hurt. But I think you just have to keep putting one foot in front of the other, and don't make the steps too big. Sometimes we think, all this stuff about being a boss bitch and, taking over the world and reclaiming your power and all that sort of stuff is great, but actually it's not very helpful when you're in the throes of it and you're feeling so much pain. You don't have the energy to be a boss bitch. You don't have the energy to take on the world. You need your energy to just rebuild yourself. So all I would say is take tiny, tiny steps forward. And if you've got through another day, brilliant. If that's all you can handle, brilliant. You've done it.
Yeah. I mean, it's really fascinating. Thank you for being so open. I think it takes a lot of courage, but it does inspire so many people hearing your story, because I think we all go through that period where the school gates, that dynamic changes. As mums, it's a great place to be. Your friends are there, your kids, and everyone's sort of like a big family. But then with these life shifts, you do notice that. I know I did, and I found that really tough. And I hear it every day. I've lost friends. Where's my best friend? And sometimes it's the people that you just don't even think for a second won't be there for you. And that can feel like a double betrayal, can't it? It's like, well, in my case, my husband had an affair, but then some of my closest friends weren't there for me. And, sometimes that can feel almost as painful in a strange way, because you count on them, don't you?
Yeah. And I suppose, because again, it had happened to me before, there was this, never mind the great resignation of the pandemic, my great resignation was of resigned to here we are again. And there was a level of understanding, because I thought, also I'd done a lot of work on myself in that time. I hadn't had therapy or anything. That came years later. I didn't have therapy for the breakdown of either of my marriages and the toxic relationships that I had found myself in until years later, because I did what I urge people not to do. And I just buried it, put a lid on it, put something heavy on top of that lid, and thought, right, I'm not going to look at that anymore. Yeah. And then one day it came bursting out, and I realized, actually, wow, I haven't looked at any of this stuff, and I need to deal with it. But the great resignation was of, here we go again, standing at the school gates. And there are very, very few, I can count on only a few fingers, never mind one hand, the amount of women who actually did reach out and go, I may not come up to you at the school gate. They emailed me through the, finding my email through, school things or group, WhatsApp group things.
Yeah.
To say, I'm uncomfortable coming up to you at the school gates because I don't know how you're feeling right now and where you are with all of this, but I just want you to know that I'm really sorry you're going through this. And that's enough, actually, even just to hear, I'm sorry you're going through this. I'm not going to come and chat with you about it, but I'm sorry you're going through this. But there was also a level of understanding, because we all operate at some level from a place of fear. And our way to protect ourselves from that is to put ourselves somewhere where we feel safe and we feel comfortable. And anything that removes that feeling of safety or comfort is seen as a threat. And on an intellectual level, I recognize this. So I've now gone from being that famous woman off the telly to now I'm a single famous woman off the telly. And women can react very strangely to that. And they think somehow I can't invite her around for a cup of tea or to dinner because now she's single and now she's a threat. I'm not a threat. I don't fancy a husband. I'm not interested in anything of that sort. I just wanted you to be my friend. But I understand where you're coming from, because, and this isn't just me and because I'm someone off the telly, many, many divorced women find themselves in this situation where they're not invited round because they were invited as a couple and suddenly they don't count as a single person. And all those friendship groups that you built up as a couple go, not because anyone's blaming you for anything, but because they suddenly feel uncomfortable having you around as a single woman. And that's lonely and it really hurts and it's so unnecessary.
Yeah. You're suddenly off the dinner party circuit, aren't you? You don't get invited over for those things. It's very true. It's very true. And, having been through that myself, I totally get that. And that's something that I think people don't talk about very often. You talk about going through the divorce and the legal paperwork and how upset you are, but that can feel like a real desertion, actually. So whilst that's going on, obviously you're married now, happily, to Nick, who is lovely. I've met him. We met at the Anything is Possible conference, didn't we? How did you get back out there dating again? Because there's going to be a lot of people listening thinking, that's hard enough when you're not public eye. Getting on a dating app is, it's tough right now, for anyone. But how do you go back out there and start dating again? And was it easy for you? Did you find that difficult?
I had no interest in it whatsoever. I thought to myself once, I suppose the kind of explosion of it all had calmed down, and it does feel like an explosion. I thought, I'm clearly not cut out for this. I've tried twice, and to put it into context, you mentioned I'm remarried now. So I've been married now 3 times. I've dated in the whole of my life 4 people. I married 3 of them. So all it is I have a really high hit rate of people asking me to marry them, and I say yes. It doesn't mean that I've kind of been around or whatever. It doesn't mean that at all. It just clearly means and I see it as a compliment. I don't see it as, oh my God, I have a really good success rate. Yeah, exactly. So for me, at that point, I just thought, what, I'm done. So what I did, rather than join a dating app, was I joined agricultural college. I decided I needed to do something that kept me busy, and it was something that would bring me joy. So I was working on Loose Women at the time, and I joined an agricultural college near where I live, and I did a garden design course. And I mean, I turned a few heads in the canteen, I can tell you. When I turned up and there's people going, isn't that woman off the telly? And I was like, yeah, it's me, but I also really love gardening. So I'm here to learn, just treat me the same as everyone else. And after a while, everyone kind of calmed down, and they did. That got me through the first year, because it was really important to me to build and nurture something into life, because everything had felt like it had died or had been ruined. And I needed to, there's something really beautiful about gardening. So I threw myself into that. And then people ask, oh, so you're a qualified garden designer? I'm not. I actually didn't finish my course because I got invited to do panto, which is the weirdest reason to not finish a course ever. But I actually didn't qualify because I had to do panto. So I was a fairy godmother in a panto. I know, weird. But again, I was I'd found my peace with my own company. And this is what I would recommend everyone to do, male or female. Find peace with your own company. Who am I if I am not part of another person's life? What do I like? You know, half the time we don't even know what we like, because we're so used to kind of going along with what has been, I don't know, seen as acceptable for the two of you. Or maybe you're a little bit more acquiescing, or you're a people pleaser, because I know I was.
Yeah.
And it was sitting down and thinking, what do I actually want to do? So that passed that amount of time. In terms of dating, I mentioned I dated someone and didn't marry them. That was, I got invited to a charity ball or something, and a friend of mine sat me next to a gentleman, and I didn't know I'd been set up at this point, but I was. So we went out for a while, and we dated for a few months, and then it became really apparent that actually I was doing the same thing again. And it was friends of mine actually staged an intervention, and they literally, I stood in front of me and went, "We can see what you're doing. You're shrinking. You're putting yourself down again. You're letting him put you down. You're losing yourself. Your spark that had just started to come back is going again. And we can't let you do this for a third time. So we're standing in front of you and we are demanding that you break up with this person." And so I did.
Friends.
Good friends. Exactly.
Friends like that. Absolutely.
Exactly. And funny enough, they were work colleagues. They were it was the makeup department at Loose Women. Because in when you sit in the makeup department, it's like a hairdresser's.
Yeah.
Everybody, you know, we all tell our hairdressers our whole life, so it's like that. And they literally, apparently they'd had a little meeting about me, and I came in one day and they went, "Right, enough is enough. You are drawing a line under this." So I did.
Also, for you, for listening, because we can tell friends this isn't the right person for you, but quite often people want to make their own mistakes, right?
Oh, I'd already made loads of my own mistakes. I've been married before, so it was fine. But also I knew in my heart. But I think, you know, and I had entered that relationship with a very kind heart, because I could actually see, and I don't wish this person, who I won't say who they are, I wish them so much love and wellness. I really do. And I could see they were hurting, and I wanted to help them.
Yeah.
But I was never going to. I was not right for them.
Yeah.
And deep down he knew it, and he, instead of just doing the honorable thing, I think he did what many men do, and they just think, if I'm mean enough to her, she'll go. I just kind of hung on to his leg, which is what I tend to do. But anyway, in terms of how did I end up remarrying again and finding love again, it's really I didn't want to. It's a bit like when I first found myself working in television. My friend Donna in the makeup department at Loose Women, she said, "Right, you need to have a laugh. All you do is you work, you look after your children, and that's your whole life. So you need a laugh." So a friend of my husband's is getting divorced. I've only met him a couple of times, but he seems nice and he seems lots of fun. Come out on a double date with us, and even if nothing happens, you'll have a good laugh and it'll be fun. And I was literally like, oh, I so don't want to do this. I've never dated, really. I've never been on an app. I've never joined a dating agency or anything. I don't even know how to. I mean, I say that the previous man I dated, we just kind of became friends and got to know each other and went out. You know, it was like that. Yeah. So and any single mother will understand this, I had to drop one child to one house. I had to drop, which was in London, I had to drop another child to north of London. Then I had to drop the dog to the kennels. Then I had to drive all the way down to Brighton for this one date. By the time I got there, I just thought, oh, do you know, I'd really like to just stay in this hotel, put deli on, just order a bottle of wine at the inn. This is ridiculous. But I went out and I met Nick that night on this blind date that I did not want to go on. And apparently he didn't want to go on it either. And we both only went because we didn't want to let our friends down.
Oh,
And we've been together ever since.
very sweet. What a story. What a story. And that actually also shines a light on, the less glamorous side of going on dates, doesn't it? Because we all have to then juggle kids and dogs and where we're going to stay and driving and parking. It's not as easy as it used to be, is it? And now you have a blended family, right? So you and Nick both have kids. So how does that work? Have you got any tips for someone listening who is about to blend their families together? What would you advise?
We do have a blended family. We are very lucky that our children are kind of all within the same age bracket. So that's helpful. So our children now are, because it's nearly 10 years on now, are 16, 18, 20 and 21. But obviously, subtract 10 years, that's where we were then.
Yeah.
So it was very challenging, I won't lie. And it still has its challenges, of course it does, because it brings up its own dynamics, and you think you can parent equally, but you don't. You think you can, but you don't, and that's both of us, And I think recognizing that is really, really important. And also, you can't control the dynamics that happen outside of your home. So we have 3 exes between us who each have different parenting styles and different rules and what have you, compared to in our house. So the kids are moving between these spaces, and it is challenging. We have found our way with it, which is great. What I would suggest is, and this came into our life years later, and it would have been useful if we'd known about it earlier, is family coaching. Now, family coaching is different to family counseling, because, and obviously family counseling is very important if say a divorce happened for very traumatic reasons, and the children are moving in and out of spaces where they maybe don't feel as safe, or they need to understand why certain things have happened. So of course family counseling is important, but family coaching gives you the tools that you need, just as you do with helping people go through divorce. If you deal with a family coach or someone who's used to dealing with young people or children, it really helps give all of you as a family the tools that you'll need when you come together as a blended unit. And it helps you take individual responsibility. It gives you empathy and understanding, rather than reacting with, well, this is my house and this is how I do things, and expecting everybody's just going to jump in line. That's never going to work.
Is something you all go to together? Do you all, with the kids, both of you go with all the kids?
How we have done it is actually the kids go individually.
Okay.
And they go one, and I think that's important. They feel heard.
Yeah.
Because if you go, there's a lot of us, there's 4 kids and 2 grown-ups and but because obviously with our training now, because we've both trained as coaches, and we now work with people who come to the table with all kinds of different challenges, I suppose we have a better level of understanding than most parents would, and also most individuals would. What's strange is this thing that I used to feel so much shame about actually has become incredibly useful as an empathetic tool when I'm listening to other people, because there's nothing you can tell me that I won't understand. I haven't read it in a book, I felt it. So that's made it really powerful. But in terms of the kids and their coaching, we found that if they go on one-to-one, they're able to be really open. We all may think as parents that we have a great relationship with our kids and they tell us everything. They don't. Of course they don't. We didn't tell our parents everything. And even if we're progressive and we're free thinking and we're all the things, we're still their parents. So they're not going to tell us everything. So it's really important that they have somewhere where they can offload to someone who understands, but who then also gives them tools, clarity and tools to move forward. And we found that's made the biggest difference.
I love that. I love that idea. And I think children having a voice and being able to say what they think is super important. As you said, without the tools to create the change, then it doesn't work. But absolutely. And having walked in the shoes, you are such an empowering coach, I think, because you've lived that experience, Andrea. So tell us now, you've pivoted, you are doing your coaching. Tell us about what you're doing now and how people can find you and get involved.
Well, I mean, I was part of the Great Resignation during the pandemic, of which I had no idea that I was part of something that everyone else was doing. You know, no one does when they're doing something that's just related. We just do what we want to do for ourselves. Yeah. I've been interested in growth, personal growth, in coaching, probably. So I'm in my mid-50s now, so probably the last 30 years or so. I just didn't know that was its name. I'd been interested in psychology and human behavior. It was something that I'd done as part of my degree many years ago, but also through the skills that I'd learned in interviewing people and learning to be empathetic and this kind of thing. And then really, I realized I wanted to take something that comes very naturally to me, which is to be empathetic and to want to lift and build. But I wanted to do it in a different way, rather than just simply listening to someone's story when I interview them. And particularly on the TV show that I worked on, the maximum amount of time that I might have with a really fascinating guest, the maximum would be 8 minutes. Wow. Now, take into account, you have 2 minutes to calm them down because they're on live television. That leaves 6 minutes to really get them to explain themselves. They've just started to get warmed up, and then you're going, I'm so sorry, we've run out of time. Yes. And I just didn't want to do that anymore. And clearly, obviously, I could do it through podcasts and this sort of thing. But I also wanted to take my skill set and bring it to the masses, if you like. I'm really fortunate that I get to meet experts in their field. My little black book is brilliant, but not everybody has that luxury. So I wanted to sort of bring it to everyone. And so I set up This Girl Is on Fire. It started off as an online blog where I, again, used my skill set, was interviewing people. Then it became a community. I've now moved it. It's been going for, it's coming up to 6 years now. And was it 5 years? 5 or 6 years. And now I've moved it onto Facebook, and it's a beautiful, safe space. It's a private Facebook group where I have conversations about midlife issues. You're on my bucket list, Missy, so I'm going to be having a chat with you about coming onto my Facebook group about literally anything that affects us in midlife, and I offer them tools and support. I also I run courses, I run workshops, I do live events, I go into companies and just show them that actually companies put so much emphasis on the bottom line, and I get that, I totally understand that, but actually by empowering your workforce to feel really great about themselves at whatever experience they're going through at home, in this instance, with regards to what we're talking about now, it could be divorce. People in your team could be going through a horrific situation at home right now, but imagine if you had the tools where you were making them feel good about themselves while they're at work. What a tool. So what I do is I go in and I show teams just how to build their self-belief, build their confidence. Doesn't matter what you're going through, I will have been there, but also I can show you how to, whether it's put a brave face on at work, how to use your experiences to empathize with your clients, with your teammates. I bring that into all different sorts of walks of life, and I love it. I love what I do.
Well, you are like a ray of sunshine, I have to say. I mean, for those people watching, you can just see you glow, and you've got such an amazing energy. So I can well imagine that you're inspiring so many people through the corporate work, which is an unusual avenue for personal development, but one that is, as you say, much, much needed. So where can people find you? How can people join your Facebook group?
Well, the Facebook group is for women only. So if there's any men watching, I'm very sorry, but you can't come in. Men can come to the live events that I do because they're for everybody. But for the Facebook group, just look up Andrea McLean, This Girl Is on Fire, private Facebook group, and just click to join. And I will see you in there.
I love that. I have one final question for you, Andrea, that I ask all my guests. So the podcast, as you know, is called Heartbreak to Happiness. And I think it's really important to know what happiness is, because when you are going through those really dark times, it's important to be able to tap into it as you go. So what is happiness for you, Andrea?
For me, happiness is summed up in two words, and it's two words that I try my hardest to realign myself with. And if you're not there right now, understand that, you know, a rocket that is going to the moon is off course 98% of the time. It is constantly readjusting, and that's all you're doing. So for me, happiness is finding my way back to peace and excitement. Why those two words? Because after spending so much of my adult life feeling unsettled, feeling afraid, feeling undermined, feeling worthless, coming back to a feeling of peace within myself, it feels so grounding. But there's also a side of me that I love excitement. I get a kick out of getting excited, whether it is the work that I'm doing, whether it's something that I'm really looking forward to. So if I can find a way to constantly, like that rockets that are going to the moon, just I see it like tapping, realigning, bringing myself back to base, as it were, to a feeling of peace and excitement, then I'm happy.
I love it. I mean, such wise words, really important. And I really appreciate you taking your time out to come and spend time with us on the podcast today. I know that so much of what you said would have deeply resonated. Thank you for being so brave, so vulnerable and open. It does make a massive difference to so many people. So thank you, Andrea, for joining me and being a fabulous guest.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been wonderful, and I just hope I've helped.
Oh, you definitely have. That's it for today's episode. Do head on over to Andrea McLean, This Girl Is on Fire on Facebook, so you can register and join the private Facebook group. And I look forward to you joining me on my next episode.
That's it for today's episode of Heartbreak to Happiness. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review to win a free ticket to one of Sara's virtual retreats. The retreats are a transformative combination of live webinars with Sara herself, coupled with empowering online video programs designed to help you cope better with your breakup and start feeling happy again. For more details, head on over to heartbreaktahappinesspodcast.com, where you can also get a copy of Sara's free gift. Thank you, and join us again on the next episode for another dose of Heartbreak to Happiness.